This is the story of a land that civilization forgot. It was an accidental discovery that turned it into one of the finest examples of coexistence between man and nature. The year was 1790. The East India Company had suffered heavy losses at the hands of Tipu Sultan, the King of Mysore. Colonel Arthur Wellesley was dispatched with his troops to trap Tipu at the Kumali Gap, a narrow valley in the Western Ghats. But the elusive Sultan gave them the slip once again. While retreating through the Suryanelli Valley, Wellesley chanced upon a magnificent landscape. Several ranges of rugged mist-capped mountains with densely forested valleys, watered by crystal-clear streams. Colonel Wellesley was the first foreigner to have stumbled upon the hidden beauty of Munnar, the land of the three rivers, where the Kuranyi blooms every 12 years, carpeting the hillsides with purple blossoms. Spathodias and jacarandas grace the upper reaches of the mountains. Nearly 30 years later, in 1817, Lieutenants Ward and Connor of the Madras Army conducted the first ever geographical mapping of the region. They successfully located and climbed the peaks of Anaimudi, the highest mountain in South India. Among other things, their survey revealed the rich biodiversity of the region. Wildlife was plentiful. The region was also home to smaller mammals and a bewildering variety of bird life. The area, however, was not totally unknown to man. Merchants had been using a trade route leading through the region to Travancore. They named these hills Kannan Devan's Malai, after the village chieftain who administered these 5 hamlets. It was customary for travelers to stop en route at Pallivasal to light stone lamps at the tomb of an 18th century Sufi saint, Sheikh Pir Muhammad. It is locally known as the Allah Kovil. These hills were then home to several reclusive tribes, notably the Muduvans. They still dwell in remote colonies, each led by a chief. According to legend, the Muduvans fled from the plains of Madurai to these hills, following a great socio-political upheaval. They carried their children and belongings on their backs and thus earned the name Muduvan, or the back people. They are a proud race, reluctant to mingle with others, yet they possessed an uncanny knowledge about the hills and the animals. In 1877, John Daniel Munro, an officer of the independent Kingdom of Travancore, was deputed to determine the unsettled borders of the territory. Realizing the potential of the area, Munro soon approached the Puniyat royalty for Kannan Devan Malai. Since most of the land was considered uncultivable, his request was readily accepted. Munro was granted the first Puniyat concession deed on payment. The following year, two more prospective investors appeared: Henry Gribble Turner of the Madras Civil Service and his half-brother William Turner. Having explored the region extensively, they formed the North Travancore Land Planting and Agriculture Society together with Munro. In 1879, they obtained the second Puniyat concession deed, covering an area of 227 square miles. The society's offer of land for cultivation lured planting enthusiasts. Soon labour was recruited from nearby Tamil Nadu. They trekked up the same mountain paths as the Muduvans had centuries earlier. It was the time when the planters made their first acquaintance with the Muduvan tribe. Overcoming their initial reluctance and shyness, the tribals taught the planters to build mud and wattle huts. Over time, the planters came to rely on their expertise regarding wildlife and the outdoors, employing them as guides and watchers that would last many generations till the present day. The early pioneers unsuccessfully experimented with cinchona and a few other crops before finding the elevation and terrain most suitable for tea. In 1880, tea was planted for the first time by A. H. Sharp in Parvati Estate. Tea is cultivated at elevations ranging from 3,000 to 7,500 feet on slopes of 30 to 45 degrees and does not compete with any other food crop. Its deep-running roots bind the soil firmly, preventing erosion. Rainfall in the region varies from 130 centimeters in the eastern slopes to as much as 700 centimeters on the western slopes facing the Arabian Sea. The wide variation in topography and climatic conditions has contributed to the evolution of a variety of teas. From aromatic and subtle flavors favored by connoisseurs to strong and earthy brews preferred across traditional households, the teas produced in the Kannan Devan Hills have catered to all tastes. In the early days, food and other essential supplies were transported through miles of wilderness. Consignments often took weeks to reach the plantations. Finally, in 1886, a business connection was established with a merchant in Bodhi. He agreed to provide food and supplies to the plantations and also to transport plantation produce to Tuticorin harbour for export. Boilers and other heavy equipment weighing many tons were shipped from England and hauled up the steep slopes. Soon the first tea processing factories were set up. In 1888, the Kannan Devan Planters Association was formed, its main objective being to organize and coordinate life in the plantations. New roads were opened and living conditions improved. The association continues to serve the interests of the planting community to this day. However, life in the plantations was no bed of roses. Eleanor Knight, the young bride of a planter, arrived in Munnar soon after her marriage. Enchanted by the beauty of the hills, she expressed a desire to be buried there after her death. She died of cholera 2 days later. Her husband honored her wish. Lacking a hospital, most planters personally doctored their employees using Dr. Short's book, Medicine in India, as a guide. But the ever-present threat of malaria and cholera claimed many lives. The appointment of an apothecary in 1890 was therefore a milestone in the history of the plantations. Doctors brought much relief to the community. Free medical care was provided for all workers. By 1894, 26 estates had been registered. However, a stagnant tea market adversely affected their profits, and the society's lands were widely advertised for sale in Indian and British newspapers. This drew Sir John Muir from Finlay Muir and Company, London, to Munnar in December 1894. The Finlay Group decided to invest in the high range, as the tea estates around Munnar are collectively known. The local planters were offered the option of working for the new company, and thus about 137,000 acres came under the umbrella of Finlays and their subsidiaries on a capital of £1.5 million. The new company was called the Kannan Devan Hill Produce Company, its area under tea being only around 2,000 acres then. Progress was swift under Finlays. The latest technology in communications, transport and energy was imported. In 1900, a ropeway, possibly the longest in the world, was built to link top station perched at 6,000 feet with the plains of Bodhi. In 1902, a monorail was installed, a rudimentary form of transport that consisted of a single wheel mounted on a metallic track with the other wheel on the road. In 1908, a magneto telephone system operated by crank phones was set up to connect all the tea plantations. It remained in use till as recently as 1995. Initially, the planters rode around on horses. The first motorcycle was introduced in Munnar in 1909. Soon the monorail was replaced by a light railway, all the machinery and equipment being shipped from the UK. In 1904, the Kannan Devan Hill Produce Company constructed one of India's first hydroelectric powerhouses at Pallivasal. A second powerhouse came up in 1910 at Periyakanal. In several other estates, power was generated using Pelton wheels. To cope with the food requirements of a growing workforce, the company opened a rice mill in Trichy, as well as a dairy farm at Kundalai for the benefit of the plantations. Land was also given to merchants to settle a bazaar in Munnar. Shops selling various goods and provisions opened within reach of the workers' settlements. To raise the tea estates, the pioneers had to recruit migrant workers from Tamil Nadu, who formed the backbone of the planting operations, as local labor was unavailable. In order to create and retain a permanent workforce, the planters implemented certain essential schemes that are now considered welfare measures. A new plantation culture evolved, resembling in many ways life in the small villages of Tamil Nadu. Free housing was provided across the plantations. Not only were the workers encouraged to bring their families to live with them, the company offered jobs to their wives as tea pluckers. The plan was an instant success. Women proved to be efficient pickers, skilled at using their fingers to snap off the tender leaves. Today, female workers are predominant in the tea estates. 2 working members also double the income for each family. To enable women to work, the company introduced creches where small children could be left in the care of older women while their mothers were at the plantations. Maternity benefits and health care for workers were introduced as early as 1890. All these were the felt needs of the industry, and the planters accepted them as such, much before any legislation made them mandatory. Despite all these developmental efforts, care was taken to preserve the ecology of the tea estates. It is reported that when a new project was mooted, the company's head office at Glasgow queried, "How will this affect the rainfall in the district? Besides, where will the elephants breed?" This incident goes to prove the early planters' respect and love for the environment. It became a company policy that continues to this day. The planters realized soon enough that they could not depend forever on the forests to meet their fuel requirements. Having identified a fast-growing eucalyptus species, a small consignment of seeds was smuggled in from Australia in the stockings of the general manager's wife. Today, the stately and extensive eucalyptus plantations in the tea estates fuel not only the tea factories but also the employees' kitchens. As profits increased, the quality of life in the tea gardens improved. By 1915, some 15 fully equipped tea factories were operational, and Kannan Devan Tea was a name to be reckoned with in the market. On 16 July 1924, unusually heavy rain was reported across the high range. The downpour continued for the next 2 days. Small streams swelled into raging torrents. Water levels rose along riverbanks. Finally, the waters unleashed their fury on the plantations. The receding floodwaters left a trail of utter devastation. Many lives had been lost. The very infrastructure of the plantations had been wiped out. But the resilient planters and their workers simply refused to give up. The railway had been washed away, but a second ropeway was built in 1926. The Kundalai Valley Ropeway, linking Munnar with Top Station, was completed at a cost of Rs 7.61 lakhs. In the same year, a veterinary department was opened to look after the livestock in the high range. In 1928, the Munnar Top Station Road was opened, enabling buses to transport passengers and mail. Buses also started plying to Udumalpet. The outlet road to Cochin was opened in 1931 and the Kumali Road in 1952. Thus, Munnar was linked to Cochin, Coimbatore and Madurai. In 1940, the country's first arch dam was built at Sedu Parvatipuram, and in 1947, work started on the Madhupetti Dam with the assistance of British-Canadian engineers. The project was completed in 6 years.
And now the time comes.
On the 15th of August 1947, India gained her independence. As elsewhere in the country, this momentous event was greeted with widespread celebrations in the high range. In the same year, Indian managers were inducted for the first time into the administration of the company. The early planters understood the need for conservation. To preserve the local flora and fauna for posterity, they set up the High Range Wildlife and Environment Preservation Association as early as 1928. Later, it was the association that persuaded the central government to declare Eravikulam a national park. The association also continues to collaborate with the Forest Department in the management of Eravikulam, perhaps the only NGO in the country to be associated with the administration of a national park. Over the years, recreation has been actively encouraged. The Finlay Shield football tournament, started in the early 1940s, continues to be as popular as ever today, whipping up a great deal of enthusiasm. The Kannan Devan Hills Lands Resumption Act of 1971 was a major development. The government took over certain areas in the concession, exempting the areas under tea, building sites, burial grounds, playgrounds, etc. 3 years later, 58,740 acres, including the exempted areas, were restored to the company. In 1964, Tatas, in association with the Finlays, established an instant tea factory near Munnar. 1973 saw the introduction of the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, under which the Indian government required foreign companies to Indianize their holdings by 60%. The Tatas purchased the complete business interests of the Finlay Group, and a new company, Tata Finlay Limited, was born. In 1983, the Finlay Group exited their plantations in India, which were taken over entirely by Tata Tea Limited. The advent of Tata Tea saw an era of all-round development and innovation. To eliminate the dependence on the auctions and ensure that teas reached customers in the shortest possible time, a novel scheme was introduced: packeting of teas. This was followed by the setting up of one of Asia's largest tea factories at Chanduvarrai Estate. Later, an automated tea factory was constructed at Madhupetti, and cultivation of organic tea was introduced at Chanduvarrai Estate. In particular, the Tata era is remembered for its significant contributions to healthcare, education, and community development, the cornerstones of the group's policy. The General Hospital, the company's main referral facility in Munnar, was thoroughly modernized. Today, a team of committed medical personnel, assisted by state-of-the-art equipment, provides specialized healthcare not only for the company's employees, but also for thousands of non-company personnel as well. The prestigious High Range School was built in 1985. A co-educational institution, it is well known for its academic excellence and holistic approach to education. Later, Shrishti was established, a unique example of compassion and care for the physically and mentally challenged. Here, the differently abled children of employees are provided free education, specially tailored to meet their individual needs. They are also taught various vocational skills as part of their rehabilitation into the mainstream of society. Atulya is a novel concept of creating wealth from waste. Here, differently abled students and adults learn the art of producing handmade paper and stationery using natural additives found in the plantations. Aranya is synonymous with creativity. It revives the ancient art of textile dyeing using organic pigments found in nature. The project turns out a fascinating range of dyed fabrics whose brilliant hues and elegant colors are much sought after by the fashion industry. The production of high-range strawberry preserve not only allows the employees additional income through strawberry farming, but also generates gainful employment for differently abled youngsters. In a modern plant, they produce a truly delicious preserve using natural ingredients and fresh strawberries. These three projects continue to be administered by the Tatas, proof of their abiding commitment to social welfare. Faced by a prolonged crisis arising from depressed tea prices, in 2005, Tata Tea decided to exit its plantations in order to focus on brands. To safeguard their interests and livelihood, the employees in the plantations in Munnar were offered a unique employee buyout scheme, whereby they would become part owners of the business enterprise. Thus, 69% of the shareholding passed into the hands of the employees, with the Tatas retaining 18% and 7% with the trust. The remaining 6% are held by ex-employees and others. Once again, the name of the brand changed. The Kannan Devan Hill Plantations Company Private Limited came into being on the 1st of April 2005. It is the first and largest participatory management company in India, with 97% of the 12,500 strong workforce being shareholders. New ideas need innovative implementation. In a radical shift from the past, The company has introduced a bottom-up management plan rather than the traditional top-to-bottom hierarchy. A multi-tiered system of committees is in place to advise on the functioning of the company from the divisional level, which is the smallest administrative unit. The workers and staff are each represented by a director on the board. The first worker director, incidentally, was a woman. To help raise the standard of living further and promote independence, self-help groups function effectively in each estate. As the name implies, these groups aim to make the workers self-reliant. Life in the Kannan Devan Hills has turned a full circle. Today, the third and fourth generations of the early workers who helped to raise the plantations have taken destiny in their own hands. Each employee is now a proud shareholder of the company that their forefathers had helped to build. It is a truly unique philosophy that instills a sense of individual pride and responsibility. The success of this model is tellingly reflected in the awards bagged by the company in the prestigious Golden Leaf competition that selects the best teas in South India. The Kannan Devan Hills Plantations Company won as many as 6 awards in the inaugural competition and won 4 awards in 2007, the maximum won by any organization. The company strives to create a business model that is environment friendly, economically viable, energy efficient, and technologically innovative. Tea remains a favorite and affordable health drink for the common man. It is perhaps the only plant that yields money every week for well over a century. The industry is highly labor intensive, providing employment for thousands of unskilled people while earning crucial foreign exchange for the country. During the past century, a distinct plantation culture has evolved in these hills. It reflects a love for the indigenous people, the wildlife, and the ecology of this hauntingly beautiful region. This deep sensitivity is ingrained in the fact that the people who owned the land for well over a century chose to cultivate only 1/3 of it, preserving and enriching the remaining area as God's own country. It is a place that entices each visitor to build a personal relationship with nature.